Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Greenways are one part of Bloomington's transportation plan to calm traffic and make streets safer for pedestrians and cyclists.
It improves walking and bicycling by providing this reliable corridor for people to use where they will feel safer and more comfortable.
But some say the city is creating greenways where they're not needed. Doctors know how to treat illnesses from tick bites, but not much about the arachnids who attach themselves to people and animals.
And so the gap is really in understanding where different species of ticks occur in the United States.
Purdue researchers are working to educate doctors about when and where ticks can be most dangerous. And we talk with an expert about what may come from the state Supreme Court's hearing on Indiana's near-total abortion ban. We'll have these stories, plus the latest news from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. The future of abortion rights in Indiana is now in the hands of the state's 5 Supreme Court justices. The court heard arguments Thursday in a lawsuit challenging Indiana's near-total abortion ban. Abortion care providers want the court to find that the Indiana Constitution's right to liberty includes a right to abortion. Some of the justices, including the newest, Derek Moulter, pushed back on that, wondering if such a ruling would be too broad.
Is there a point in the pregnancy, for example, where the General Assembly is allowed by our Constitution to take away the right to terminate a pregnancy if it's not necessary to protect the life or health of the woman?
The providers argue Indiana's previous law banning abortion after 20 weeks of pregnancy would be acceptable. The justices pushed back against some of the state's arguments, too. Justice Christopher Goff focused on a part of the ban that forces abortion clinics to shut down entirely, not even allowed to perform abortions that would remain legal.
They're specialists in this particular service, and so if someone of limited means wanted to go and have access to a procedure to save her life, and she couldn't, isn't that problematic?
The court gave no timetable for its ruling. Well, we're joined now by Jennifer Drobak, a professor of law at the Indiana University Robert H. McKinney School of Law. Welcome to the show, Professor.
Thank you so much.
So those suing the state say the law violates the Liberty Clause in the state constitution. Is that a valid argument?
Yes, that's a valid argument, given that the Liberty Clause of the Indiana Constitution has been interpreted much more broadly than the Liberty Clause has recently been interpreted by the United States Supreme Court. So we will see if the Indiana Supreme Court continues with its broad interpretation of the liberty/privacy/autonomy clause of the Indiana Constitution.
So abortions have been allowed to continue in the state, but if the law is upheld, could there be criminal consequences for medical professionals?
Yes, those would kick back into effect. And so the decision by the Indiana Supreme Court is going to be really important, not only for doctors who practice in Indiana, but for their patients. And so if the stay is lifted, the law goes back into effect, and abortion, for all practical purposes, really, there are a few exceptions, but for all practical purposes, it will be illegal in Indiana.
There's also a concern the law could limit access to contraception. The FDA recently made abortion pills more readily available. So how will that factor into what's going on in the state?
Again, I hate to be slippery on this, but it's not really clear, because while the FDA has clarified that electronic access and access through mail is legal, Indiana has prohibited the practice of taking these pills when not in the presence of a licensed provider who is giving these pills under the strictest rules. So it's not really clear whether or not the rule in Indiana would be used, the law in Indiana would be used by the Attorney General's office to prosecute either doctors that prescribe them within Indiana, or whether it could reach to other states. Now, arguably, a doctor in another state who does telemedicine with someone here, it's just not clear what the legality of this is. It's also not clear how the law would be enforced. We want to have a situation where, for example, that you can use an IUD, but the IUD might interfere with an established pregnancy, in which case it's an abortion. However, IUDs have been commonly viewed as being contraceptive devices. So there are also pills like Plan B, which are intended to be contraceptive pills. But if used, they could also work as abortifacients. So the question is, since women are not supposed to be prosecuted if they are taking these drugs on their own, as they would be prescribed by a doctor, under this law, could they be prosecuted? I don't think so, but I wouldn't want to give legal advice to any woman in this state.
Yeah. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Eliminating textbook fees for public and charter schools and some private school students is part of Governor Eric Holcomb's proposed $1.2 billion increase in education funding. Fees can range from $100 to $250 per student a year and include use of computers, laptops, and online materials. Indiana is one of 7 states that charge these curriculum fees, and the state has discussed eliminating them many times in the last several years.
This has been a conversation for 20 years, but perhaps with high inflation, with record state revenue, perhaps this will be the year. This will be the time for them to accomplish that.
Holcomb's legislative agenda also calls for the expansion of On My Way pre-K eligibility, increased teacher salaries, and incentives for literacy programs. While the governor is pushing for more funding for public education, lawmakers are considering a bill that would greatly expand the school choice voucher program. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Cumber-Weiland reports it would let families receive most of the state funding local public schools would have gotten to educate their child.
Currently, low and middle income parents who have children with disabilities and choose to leave public school are eligible for thousands of dollars in aid under a state program. The money can be used to pay for special education services. The proposed bill would expand the eligibility of this program to all students. Jenny Whitaker teaches high school math. She says there is no accountability in terms of funding for the bill.
The lack of state oversight and the lack of parameters on who can receive this newly created voucher puts the state in a financial risk. There are no limits on who can receive these vouchers.
Others testifying for the bill argue the expansion would give families more choices in how they educate their children.
All transactions are viewed and reported in real time, and we have extensive guardrails in place to protect our tax dollars and to protect our ESA families.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Cumber-Weiland.
Bloomington's transportation plan was adopted in 2019 and includes more than 30 projects ranging from corridor studies and multi-use pathways to greenways. One underway is the Hawthorne Greenway. Benta Boutier has this story.
The Hawthorne Weatherstone Greenway is one of 9 Greenway projects in the transportation plan and is currently open for public comment. It's meant to create a safer north-south connection between IU's campus and neighborhoods south of Hillside by installing traffic calming structures. The goal is to get people to drive around 15 miles per hour in neighborhoods. The city has held 3 public meetings on the project. The latest one was in December, when Weatherstone resident Jeremy Seat spoke. He favors pedestrian and bicycle-friendly efforts. He sees this project as a step in that direction. Seek says his family has benefited from other greenways in the area.
We very much look forward to this Hawthorne Greenway. It'll be a fantastic way for the kids to get to campus. And what I'm really appreciating about it is that I'll feel a lot safer about my kids walking or biking to campus along this Greenways.
But Philip Sutton's lived on Hawthorne for nearly 50 years and questions the need for the project. He says there's not much bike or car traffic in the area, just mostly people walking dogs. He's okay with the plan to add a pathway at the woods at the end of Weatherstone on the Greenway's south side.
Go ahead and put the thing at the end, go ahead and pave the street, but don't do major reconstruction of bump outs and things.
Beth Rosenberger, the city's assistant director for planning and transportation, says the city doesn't want to wait for an accident to happen to make it safer to walk or bike in the area. Because the road is relatively low volume, it makes it a good option for a neighborhood greenway.
It doesn't impact driving a lot, but what it does is it improves walking and bicycling for sure. So it improves walking and bicycling by providing this reliable corridor for people to use where they will feel safer and more comfortable, and they will objectively be safer using that.
We asked Rosenberger to join us on East Allen Street to explain how some already existing traffic calming structures function. She says they help create a more sustainable network.
They are sort of a tool. People tend to funnel toward them and use them to make major connections across town.
There's evidence to back up its potential benefits. Before a greenway was installed on East Allen Street, about 35% of vehicles drove 15 miles per hour. After a greenway was installed, that jumped to 77%. Bike ridership on that area increased too. Michael Buriidi is a professor of urban planning at Ball State. He says community buy-in on a project can take time that planners and politicians don't always have, which creates friction. He says greenways are a city planning tool that's here to stay because of environmental necessity.
What communities are doing is trying to adopt ways that will decrease the greenhouse impact that we all contribute to. And so the transportation network and planning that is implemented is one way to affect our impact on the environment.
This greenway isn't set in stone. The process for approving transit projects is under revision, and the Planning and Transit Department is still reviewing feedback. Sutton says when he attended the public meetings on the project, it sounded as if the plan was final. He wishes the city had spoken with people in the area before holding community meetings.
They really should talk to people before they do major plans.
But he acknowledges they did take some feedback, removing curb bump outs from some areas. Other greenways are also in the works, including the Beeline connection and West Allen neighborhood greenways set for construction this year. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Benta Boutier.
Rosenberger says creating greenways is more affordable than sidewalks. The greenway would cost between $200,000 and $400,000, while sidewalks cost $2 million per mile. Bloomington City Council members postponed a vote on the mayor's proposal to relocate the city's police and fire departments to the Showers building for at least a week. The question is whether the city should move the police and fire departments or invest in expansion at their current locations. The police union overwhelmingly opposes the proposed move to City Hall.
If we go against their best instincts and their common sense and say, we don't really care what you say, we think you're going to be better off here, we think it's going to be better off for the community, so let's just move you back here against their will, I'm not sure how well that's going to go for this community.
Councilwoman Isabel Piedmont Smith says it could be beneficial to move police closer to other city departments.
Even if it is less expensive to renovate at the current BPD station, that's not my only consideration here. I want to look to the long term.
Council members plan to put the proposal up to a vote again during their next regular session on Wednesday. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana University researchers are using uprooted trees to study extreme wind and its impact on forest evolution. And a Purdue survey shows doctors in the state know how to treat illnesses from ticks, but not a lot about the arachnids themselves. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front line
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Life is full of choices, and right now your favorite member benefit, Passport, is offering more choices for you to stream.
Welcome to the club.
It's a beautiful thing. With cooking.
I gotta let it cook, but I keep wanting to smell it.
Travel.
And here we are.
Documentaries.
I realized I could change the world.
And so much more. The choice is yours with Passport on the PBS Video app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Recording extreme wind temperatures can be challenging for scientists, but uprooted trees serve as a surprisingly helpful sign of extreme wind and how it can affect forest evolution. Kayan Tara has this report.
If you come across fallen trees with displaced roots sticking out on your hikes in Indiana, a new study says it's a sign of extreme wind events. Study co-author Brian Unitas says Indiana University researchers use LiDAR surveys, which involves putting a high-tech instrument on drones flown over 1,400 hill slopes in southern Indiana.
We're like, holy cow, we can see tree throw or wind throw, these uprooted trees in these landscapes. So let's start using this tool and seeing if we can learn something interesting.
Known as wind throws, wind-toppled trees create gaps in forest canopy, in turn affecting forest structure and evolution. Study co-author Tyler Doan says a review of initial data showed mounds and pits on hill slopes, which provided significant evidence of how often extreme wind events occur.
When you're walking in the woods and you see one of these pit mound couplets, you can immediately interpret it as some record of an extreme event, which I think, at least to me, and I hope to many others, that is an idea that will sort of drive curiosity.
The ability of forests to absorb carbon is an important factor in offsetting climate change. While it is hard to determine if climate change will cause more or less extreme winds, it adds another layer of complexity to observing wind throws in the future.
Understanding that time scale of how these natural systems evolve and emerge over all the different events happening on Earth's surface is just really sort of helps us open our eyes and realize how precious the environment really is.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Kayan Tara.
Unitas says using this new framework presented in the study can help answer outstanding questions regarding forests' significant role in absorbing atmospheric carbon. Ticks are on the move. Warmer temperatures could create more places where they can thrive in Indiana and give them more time to feed. All this could lead to more tick-borne illnesses in the future. But Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Theo reports without good data and communication, many of these diseases could go unnoticed.
Oh, I've brought out some of my medications that I used to have to take for Lyme disease.
Michelle Rawlings remembers getting bit by a deer tick while on vacation in Massachusetts about 8 years ago.
I had a very stiff neck and my shoulders hurt. And there's pain radiating down my shoulders.
She suspected it might be Lyme disease, but it took numerous doctor visits to get a diagnosis. And then 3 years ago, Rawlings visited her sister in South Bend and helped in her garden. She then developed swelling in her knee and went to her doctor.
And I said, this looks exactly like Lyme disease. I've had it before and I've got it back again. And I said, I think I know exactly how I caught it. And he looked at me and he said, oh no, you can't catch that twice.
But Rawlings did test positive for Lyme disease with another doctor after hers wouldn't administer the test. Why don't many doctors know more about tick diseases? A lot of it has to do with a lack of information and the tricky nature of tick-borne illnesses.
If you get bit on your scalp,
or if you get bit on the back of your leg, or you get bit somewhere where you don't see a rash, you could have had a bullseye rash, but you just didn't know that it happened.
Dr. Kimberly Lentz treats people with tick diseases in Zionsville.
So how you been doing?
Good. Had a couple 2 weeks ago, had 2 days where I literally couldn't go in to work at all.
Okay.
Dr. Lentz says part of the problem is how cases of Lyme disease are counted. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention requires a positive test and certain symptoms. But Lyme disease doesn't present the same way in each patient. You might have any combination of flu-like symptoms, a bullseye rash, or even some heart and nervous system issues. And the antibody test for the disease can come up with a false positive or a false negative. If a patient has the right symptoms, the doctor might not test at all. Some tick diseases can be deadly, and it's best not to wait for a test.
We usually don't even do a blood test early on. We just simply treat them for presumed Lyme disease.
All this means is there's a big lack of data out there. And without data and information, doctors can't make informed decisions for their patients. But Indiana researchers are trying to help. Purdue University, Indiana University, and the University of Notre Dame are all working to track how ticks and their diseases move across the state. Purdue postdoctoral researcher Maria Morja places a female deer tick under a microscope.
You have a hard part in this middle part, it's called the sputum. And this doesn't have the sputum all the way, so when she feeds, can grow, can enlarge.
There are 3 main ticks in Indiana: the deer tick, the American dog tick, and the Lone Star tick. And their territories overlap. New ticks are also moving into the state. The Gulf Coast tick has been spotted in Indiana, and the invasive Asian longhorn tick has been found in 17 states.
Including Kentucky, just to our south. So we are concerned that it could move into the state and potentially become established in the state of Indiana. What we don't know is what it might be able to transmit, if anything, to humans.
Last year, Purdue surveyed doctors about their knowledge of ticks and tick-borne diseases. Hill says they found doctors knew a lot about how to treat tick illnesses, but not much about ticks themselves.
And so the gap is really in understanding where different species of ticks occur in the United States, so where they're most prevalent, when they become active, and where the high-risk places and times of the year are for the public in the state of Indiana.
For example, we know you're more likely to find a tick on you in the summer, but ticks are still active in colder months. Hill remembers this past October.
I walked the dog at a park, and I have, in the last couple of days, I've recovered 8 Ixodes scapularis, or deer ticks, adult deer ticks from the dog.
Hill says Purdue does what it can to get this info out, but she says it's hard to reach doctors. Dr. John Christensen is an associate medical director of infection prevention at Riley Children's Health in Indianapolis and teaches at Indiana University School of Medicine. He says he does get notices about new ticks, but it doesn't set off alarm bells for him.
Most practitioners will say, yeah, that's nice, but has the introduction of those, vectors, has it led to an infection, right?
That's something they'll likely hear from their state or local health department.
Most people will pay attention to communications that are coming from the health department. And it may be coming from the state health department or maybe coming from the county where they live.
Health departments are often the only way to bridge the gap between doctors and tick researchers. That communication and good data could become more important than ever as more ticks and their diseases find their way into Indiana. Michelle Rawlings hopes more doctors will take the time to learn about tick diseases.
I'm really wanting to educate doctors that don't make this mistake. If you see someone in your office that has these kinds of symptoms, you should immediately test for Lyme disease and suspect that this could be Lyme disease. I don't want this to happen to anyone else.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Rebecca Thiel.
A Purdue University study estimates horse racing is a nearly $2 billion industry that touches every county of Indiana. The revenue has doubled in the last decade. This year, Indiana will host the Breeders' Crown for its 3rd time.
That's a very positive thing for Indiana to look at, that we have such a national mark that we can host those prestigious races here.
While horse racing has been included at the county fair level in Indiana since the late 1800s, a key piece of legislation in 2008 prompted expansion by allowing racetrack casinos to funnel a portion of their money toward the industry. And IU women's basketball coach Terry Morin became the winningest head coach in program history Wednesday night when the 6th-ranked Hoosiers won 83-72 at Illinois. Morin now has 189 wins in 9 seasons. She passed Jim Izzard, who coached 12 seasons. While Morin is quick to give all the credit to her players and staff, she says she won't soon forget the milestone.
You know, it's a terrific milestone. I'm grateful that we were able to do it tonight, you know, with this group. And it's one of those, as I told our players, one of those snapshot moments, those pictures, right, that you take in your mind and you'll remember it, you know, for the rest of your life.
IU is now 17-1 overall, 7-1 in the Big Ten. The Hoosiers next play Monday night at Michigan. Well, that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.